just to start with, before I even get into this, there were over 200 exhibits, people, with things to sell or provide for the church. And I don't know how many of them were, travel agents. And every one of them, have you ever been to Israel? And I say, no. Well, you need to go. We got this. And I'm like, Say and I were talking about it, and we're like, is it really safe to go right now? But it also reminds me of what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the fact that, especially with it escalating, that I truly believe God's going to come back very soon. So there are three different parts to the Southern Baptist annual meeting, Southern Baptist Convention. The first of those takes place before the actual convention. And depending on what city it is in, it's called crossover. This year was crossover Dallas. Last year, crossover Indianapolis. Next year, crossover Orlando. But it is an evangelistic emphasis. It's hosted by the North American Mission Board. They come in, send people in to train churches, help them have evangelistic outreach during that week. And, right before the convention itself starts. And according to what we heard about Crossover Dallas this year, they had 89 churches involved, over 2,955 volunteers that participated in it. This came from Tim Dowdy, who's vice president of North American Mission Board. They had 13,638 homes visited, 17,033 people heard the gospel, and 711 came to know Jesus as their Lord and Savior. So we praise the Lord for that. That happens, like I said, every year preceding the convention. And then you have the Pastors' Conference, and it starts on Sunday evening, and it's Sunday evening and then all day Monday. It was started back in 1935. It is led and planned and done by pastors for pastors. And this year, their theme had to do with 2 Timothy, and they had 8 different people lined up that preached through 2 Timothy. They had 2 Sunday night. They had 4 Monday morning, 1 Monday afternoon, 1 Monday evening. And besides that, they also had worship, different. It would be usually it's a church choir, church praise team will come in and lead worship. This year on Monday night, they also had Shane and Shane, who's a duet out of Dallas, and they came and led worship service. Well, also on Monday, this is one of the things that Celia and I went to, was the North American Mission Board Send Luncheon. It's kind of it's a big thing for North American Mission Board. There'll be, I don't know how many, 5,000-6,000 people probably at that. And you have to get tickets. It's free, but you have to get tickets in order to be able to attend. This year they started out with a comedian named Michael Jr., and he was very funny. He's been on The Tonight Show and some other things like that, but he is a Christian. He told us that he started, I don't remember, the last few years, he started a ministry to go into prisons and do his comedy routine for them. And he said the very first one he went in, he walked in and he started out with like 10 police officers, whatever they're called, correctional officers around him. And at every gate they came to, 1 or 2 would drop off. And they got down to the inner part of the prison, and this guy opened the gate and he said, "This is as far as I go. You're on your own." And he walked down into this room, and it was full of prisoners, had a little round area out in the middle, and they were kind of in a circular around him. And he knew that was where he was supposed to go, and he said he just went blank. He could not think of a joke at all. And he got really close to the center, and the first thing that popped in his mind was, well, at least I have a captive audience. But he thought, no, I can't say that. Well, he got down, and there was a man on the front row, an older guy that had a big, full beard, and I guess he had met him at some point or whatever, but the guy's name was Moses. And so when he got down in there, he said, Moses, I want you to do me a favor. When I'm finished here, I want you to go up to the warden and say, let my people go. And he said after that, it was fine. They thought it was hilarious, and everything went well. Dr. Kevin Ezel, or Ezel, I've heard it both ways, but I think it's Ezel. He's the president of North American Mission Board. He gave a report of a few things. I'll give you more about that later. But one of the things he did there is he introduced a couple named Sam and Sydney, I can't say that, Larson. They are church planters in rural Nebraska. They have a son and 2 daughters. And when their son was about 7, he started having vision issues. And it just kept getting worse and worse. Well, turns out it was part of the early stages of a disease called CLN3 Batten's disease. The initial thing is failing eyesight, eventually leaving people blind, and it is terminal. Most people with it don't live past their late teens or early 20s, and their son have it. It's also genetic. So they had their daughters tested, and both of them have the same thing. And when they were here, I believe the older of the 2 girls had started having some vision problems. And so one of the things the North American Mission Board does every year, I don't know how long they've been doing it, but they find some people in North America, missionaries or volunteers or whatever, and they try to do something really nice for them. And so they decided to do something for this family. The mother, Sydney, she said, by the way, their son's name is Alaska. And she said, once we got Alaska's diagnosis, it almost pushed that pedal down even harder. I think Sam and I both felt a new level of urgency to plant the church and spread the hope of the gospel. And they went on and talked about things that that they experienced, and like every day they were learning things and doing things. So Dr. Ezel has contacts with some people that have some money, and one thing that they wanted to do was give a trip to this family, someplace really nice. So he said he went up to Alaska. Of course, by this time Alaska is pretty much blind. And he said, so tell me, where would you like to go? If you could go anywhere in the world, where would you like to go? And he said he wanted to go to Prehistoric Putt. It's a miniature golf place in Lincoln, Nebraska. and he said, Dr. Ezel said something like, yeah, I think that's within our budget. We can do that. But they ended up sending him, the family, all of them, on a Disney cruise. I don't think they've done that yet. I think they're going to be doing it later this summer. And then they started talking about other things, and they, again, had people that donated the money to do it, but they bought him a new truck and her a minivan so that they don't have to worry about traveling, because where they're at in rural Nebraska, they have to do a lot of traveling to the doctor and ministering at the church and things that way. And then after that, they invited several families. Yet last year, they had several families that were trying to adopt. One of them, I think, adopted 4 or 5 kids, but I know multiple kids with some of them. And the North American Mission Board, again, donations, they help these people with the funds needed to do the adoption and to help them out. So I introduced them all and had them tell what's been going on the last year and how things were going. And then he introduced a friend of his who was very much involved in adoption. In fact, Dr. Ezel has adopted 2, I think, and then this guy has adopted a couple, and he did a concert for us. and that was Stephen Curtis Chapman. So we got to hear a concert from him. We also got to see a lot of our friends. We got, especially one of Sue's roommates, her husband is now director of missions down in San Antonio, and we got to spend the evening with them, had dinner together, and talked a lot. I also saw Tim and Glenette Russell. You all may remember him. He was director of missions here in Capital Association before I came on staff here. It was like a year or two. And I know when things were going on at the church that he came out and he helped with y'all. I did see also Cameron and Sharon Whaley. Terry Riles, and he did a revival for us years ago. And a friend from Gainesville and lots of other friends, not just people that were new to us, okay? And then all day Tuesday and all day Wednesday are the business meetings. They have business, they have reports, they have motions, resolutions that were submitted beforehand, recommendations that came from the executive board, our executive committee, all of the entities, including the North American Mission Board, International Mission Board, Guidestone, all of Lifeway, all of those, all 6 of our Baptist seminaries. And so there's a lot of sitting and listening to people give reports or business. And I want to start with some reports. I will tell you this, one of the funny things that happened, the new president at Gateway Seminary, his name's Adam, and I just went blank. Anyway, he has black, fairly long hair, but not long this way, but long up here, and he usually has it kind of poofed up a little bit. Well, I don't know whether it was wind or something, but it all kind of blew it forward, so his hair was sticking out like this. And he, was talking and moving back and forth, and this hair just flopping. And at the end of the reports, they always ask if anyone has any questions. And one of the guys went up to the mic and he said, I've got a question, and this is probably from, all of us out here. What kind of gel do you use in your hair? So there were some funny things that happened too. Another one got up and asked one of the other seminary professors how his lawn was doing. And he said, because when I was a seminary student there, that was one of my jobs, was to mow your lawn. And he said, it's green. And that's all he said. So, but anyway, just to give you a little bit of the, a little report of the different things happening. There were 10,599 messengers. Now, our church, at our size church, I believe that we could actually have, I want to say 15. Every church in the convention is allotted at least 10, and depending on the size of your church, you can get more. It might be that we just have the 10. I may be thinking of the BGCO because the BGCO does the same thing. So anyway, 10,599 messengers. There were 4,141 guests, 3,433 exhibitors, and making the total of 18,173 people, which I believe was the largest, but if not, at least one of the largest conventions ever. The messengers came from 3,899 churches from all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico. In fact, riding back on the bus one night, there was a lady and her kids, and they were from Puerto Rico, and we talked to them a little bit. Were you there? Is that okay? I couldn't remember. The North American Mission Board, by the way, this is the book of reports, and if you want to read it or look at it, you're welcome. I will let you have it. The North American Mission Board report is 25 pages long, just that one report, and they're from everything. But I'm going to tell you some highlights. We have over 3,000 missionaries involved in church planting and stuff like that around the North America. Last year, there were 767 new churches formed. Dr. Ezel said that by the year 2030, so that's not long, 5 years from now, that 1/3 of all Southern Baptist churches will have been started since 2010. That's amazing. And a lot of that helps because those are the ones that tend to baptize more people. In fact, 25% of the baptisms last year all were reported by those churches. There were also more churches started last year in Canada than the entire history of Canada. Now, they never said the entire history combined, so I don't know whether it's the entire history combined or just there were more started last year than any other year in Canada's history. Disaster relief, which is part of that, they provided 1,417,039 meals and shared the gospel 42,225 times. We also have chaplain services through the North American Mission Board. There's over 3,100 of those. And I think this is the third or fourth year in a row baptisms across North America were up. In fact, North America, this last year, they were up over 10% from the year before. So God is working even in North America. You know, a lot of times we hear about God working out in the foreign nations, but He's working here too. The International Mission Board, the president of that is Paul Chitwood. His report's only about 12 pages long, but it said in there that at the end of the year, in the end of 2024, there were 3,600 adults and 3,000 of their children, as well as 11,600 volunteers serving in long-term missions around the world. Last year, 451,000 people heard the gospel. 141,206 people accepted Jesus, and 116,481 were baptized. 269,000 people were discipled. I did the wrong thing there. And 63,500 almost were trained in leadership. So all of those things have been very, very important. They've really started pushing those kinds of things, you know, in around the world. There are also 58 newly appointed international Mission Board missionaries that were. They had a celebration. This was on Tuesday night, and they introduced a lot of it. Well, they introduced every one of them, but then they shared a little bit. Had some of them share about their calling and thanks those who supported the Great Commission. And he said, Paul Chitwood said that these missionaries are supported first and foremost by local churches. And so you had a part in all of that. This is also the 100th anniversary of the Baptist Faith and Message and the Cooperative Program. So back in 1825, the Baptist Faith and Message was first written. It was revised in 2000 to bring, you know, the wording and stuff more up to date. But they had a big celebration of that. And then the Cooperative Program. Now, before the Cooperative Program, they had mission societies and Bible societies, and each one of them would be involved in getting their own support. So you would have missionaries come into your church, and they, you know, present their needs, and the church would take up an offering, and then they go to another church and another church and another church, and a lot of churches still do that. Talking to individual churches about supporting them. Well, back in 1825, the Southern Baptist Convention started what is known as the Cooperative Program. As my Baptist history professor said, it was putting all our asks in one basket. So that instead of having to do all of that, we take up money, just like Paul encouraged the churches to do, to take up money every week, and then when the missionaries need it. And I have heard lots of missionaries from other churches that are, in a sense, envious of Southern Baptist missionaries because they get their check every month exactly on time. And it's very important. I had a friend when I was in seminary. He was a missionary in Brazil, and in Brazil the cost of living, what's it called? Inflation was so high. It was several percent each month. And he said, so anything other than things that would spoil, you bought as soon as you got your check, because by the end of the month, they're probably a 25 to 50% higher. It was just runaway inflation, really, really bad. And he said, other than things like milk and stuff that way, they bought everything they needed for a whole month as soon as they got the check in. But a lot of those missionaries were sitting around waiting and waiting and waiting. A lot of them had to go back home because churches, things happened and they were no longer able to help them out. In the business part, there were a lot of things that were just cut and dried, but there were 3 or 4 that were kind of controversial. I don't remember how many I wrote down. I guess 4 of them that were controversial. But I want to share it with you so you know kind of what's going on. One was a motion to ask all SBC entities to fill out the equivalent of a Form 990, which I have no idea what it is. It's something with the IRS. The Dr. Jorg, how would they say it? Jorg. He's the president of the executive committee. He spoke against it mainly because we as entities, as a church or as the Southern Baptist Convention, do not want the government to say you have to fill this out, because there's a lot of things that they require that would change how we do things. But there were some people that were saying, that we don't have enough openness with how they're spending the money and what they're spending it on. And most of that really was from what I understand, with the North American Mission Board. And there was a lot of discussion back and forth, but that motion failed. It stays the same as it's been. They had one, they call it the Law Amendment, and they wanted to change the Southern Baptist Constitution or bylaws to say that only men can be designated as any kind of pastor or elder as qualified by Scripture. Now, several years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, this started out with Saddleback Church, which I'm sure you all have heard of. But they have some women that they have in leadership positions that they call pastors, and that they do preach and lead within their church. And so this came up 3 years ago. I don't know where that convention was 3 years ago. But in order to do that, it has to have a 2/3 majority, 2 conventions in a row. So that first year it was brought up, they got 67-something%. Last year they got 62%. So it failed because they didn't do it 2 years in a row. Brought it up again this year, they got 62% again. So they didn't even get the 2/3, so it's failed at least for another year. Most people that I talked to that were kind of voting against it or didn't vote, whatever, said it was that they just felt like it was up to the individual church to whether they called their ministers pastors or whatever, and that was kind of taking autonomy away from the individual churches. So again, I don't know how you all feel about it, but I just want to let you know. The next one, yep, come on. There we go. It was brought up several years ago. The executive committee got an anonymous report about sexual misconduct of a worship leader in a church that was part of the Southern Baptist Convention, and the church had not done anything about it. And that year, they basically de-churched them, would not let them be part of the Southern Baptist Convention anymore. And this guy that brought up the report or the motion basically said those allegations were false, and it was handled wrong, and he wanted the executive board to figure out what to do and how to make amends to this guy for defamation of character. Well, Jeff York, again, president of the executive committee, said that they were in the middle of a lawsuit right now with that man about defamation of character, and so he could not talk about it. He did say that there had been over $11 million spent on sexual abuse cases over the last few years, and in their budget for this coming year, they included $3 million right off the top to allocate for that kind of legislation or litigation, I mean. And then the last one that was controversial had to do with abolishing the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. And this is the third year in a row that this has been brought up. And every time it's the same thing as the other one. You have to have 2/3 of a majority in 2 consecutive SBCs in order to pass. Most of the people that I talked to about this, as well as people from the Ethics and Religious Liberties Commission, said it's not that they don't stand up against abortion and they stand up for human rights and all of these different things, but people just felt like they didn't make a strong enough stand. And one of the guys from the ERLC told me that the problem is in Washington. Sometimes you have to take things a step at a time. You can't go whole hog into it, or the majority of the people will rebel against it, whether they agree with any part of it or not. Again, I don't know how you feel about that, but that is the other thing. It did not pass. This is the third year it's been brought up, and it never has passed. I think they got about 40% each time. Now, they did take a strong stance against Planned Parenthood. In fact, I signed a petition about this, but Planned Parenthood receives about $700 million a year from the federal government. And the petition was sent to President Trump, or is being sent to President Trump, to ask him to stop using tax money to support Planned Parenthood. Because, we don't want our tax dollars going to a group like that. So whether anything will come of that, I don't know, but that was the other thing that was brought up. Clint Presley, he was reelected as president of the Southern Baptist Convention. A man named Daniel Ritchie, who is an evangelist and author from Summit Church in Durham, North Carolina, was elected as first vice president. And Craig Carlisle, director of missions at Etowah Baptist in Gladstone, Alabama, was second vice president. And I think that's it. Do you want to share anything?
I got to go to the minister's wife luncheon, can y'all hear me? And with about 2,000 ministers' wives. And the speaker was Sheila Walsh, who is an author, a musician, used to be on the 700 Club. I'd heard of her, but didn't really know her story, but it was very interesting. Her father was very abusive to her, and so she had a lot of baggage with that. And when she was at the 700 Club, she decided to basically go to a psychiatric hospital. And the TV station came to her and said, if people find out that you're doing this, it's gonna damage your career. You're gonna lose your career. And she said, if I don't do this, I'm afraid I'm gonna lose my life. But anyway, God met her where she was and just changed her and healed her. And it was a really good testimony to hear.
And while she was at that, I was at the small church pastor's luncheon. And again, it was really good. I had a guy that preached, and had a young man that led music. And he was very good, very gifted. We did a lot of old hymns at that one, which most of the times we didn't do hymns. We did newer stuff. So, any questions about anything? Did I give you too many numbers? All right, well, let's stand and we'll sing Showers of Blessing, right?